How's everybody doing so far? Okay. All right, these are gonna be hard acts to follow. Everybody's been doing so fantastic this evening. So, I'm in college, and a buddy of mine asked me if his little brother and a friend of his could visit me and get the college experience. So I took him around, showed him the library and the quad and the cafeteria, and then at some point, they may have gotten drunk. All I'm saying is that I put out adult beverages and they continued to consume them. And once they'd gotten properly spifficated, me and these two young gentlemen were conversing about high school because we all went to the same academy, Catholic college prep school. And, we were venting about our shared experiences, getting paddled by the headmaster for no good reason. And they started to go off on this tangent about, in the school, remember when they covered up that kid getting murdered by the police? And I was like, excuse me? I'm not really terribly familiar with that incident. And they started going back and forth. They're like, well, my friend Andy Wachowski told me, this kid was surfing on top of a car, and then the police pulled him over, and he got into a fight with him. Well, Michelle Reyes told me that he jumped off the roof and attacked them, and the stories just kept building bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm listening to it, and I'm listening to details about him, and I was like, wait a minute, that's me. And these kids are like, no, this guy's dead. I'm like, I assure you, I'm not dead. Sit down, Uncle Jay's gonna tell you what really happened. Let me take you back to the late 1900s. When I was 17 years old, I was hanging out with some friends of mine up around Mundelein, sort of Mundelein, Libertyville, Vernon Hills area. And we had for a long time been suffering from the typical teenage conundrum. When we had money, we had nowhere to go and no way to get there. And then when we did finally have access to cars and getting around, maintenance, gas, insurance, all that stuff meant we had no money, so there was no reason to go anywhere. But we had finally arrived at the perfect situation. I had allegedly started dealing drugs, so we finally had money. I admit to nothing except for the fact that there may have been some people at my high school who, after meeting with me, got very hungry. So with cash in hand, parents out of town for the weekend, everything the stars were aligning, as the saying goes. But even though we had everything lined up for an epic weekend, a lost weekend, there was still time to kill. And at risk of sounding like an Irish cliche, I learned very early on, you can't drink your way out of boredom. So you have to kick things off. You can't start with a beer, you have to start by having fun. And then beer just makes everything much more enjoyable. So I decided we were gonna do something that we had done before, which is a little sort of, for lack of a better term, Superman stunt. Essentially what happens is, my buddy Eric gets in his car and he starts driving, and then you run, in this case, myself, I'm gonna run and then parkour up the side of his car onto the roof of the vehicle, and then he's gonna take off as fast as he can go. We've done this a couple of times, successfully. Each success increasing the probability of doing it again. So here we are, dead ass sober, in the middle of sort of like a suburban subdivision, and I run up on his car and I get up on the roof, and I think I got a grip on it, and he takes off. And it was as my hand started to slide away, I realized I didn't have the proper grip, and I shouted, "Eric, stop the car!" Which he thought meant to step on the gas. So at about 40 miles an hour, I fly off the roof of his vehicle. And I saw the pavement coming up at me. Oh, no. And I thought to myself, I got this. I did not got this. I hit the asphalt like a bug on a windshield. Just disappeared into total blackness. And then a bright white light, which dissolved into focus, and I realized I was not dead. It was, in fact, the fluorescent lights of the hospital. And then I tried to move, and I couldn't move, and I thought I was paralyzed. I was not paralyzed. As a nurse pointed out when she came in, it turns out I was strapped down from head to toe with every restraint they had available.
Oh, no.
Realizing I was not dead and not paralyzed, I soon became terrified at the prospect that they would call my dad because he would definitely kill me. They let me out of the hospital about 7 days later, once they were sure that nothing was permanently broken. They let me out of the hospital 7 days later after they were sure nothing was permanently broken. Focus. And when I got back to high school, I was talking to my friends, and I was talking about like these hazy recollections I had about, I kept having these thoughts about things that were like lost dreams creeping into my memory. And when I talked to them, they were like, no, dude, that's what happened. It turns out that things had gotten a little out of hand. After what I thought was me just being unconscious was not the full event. What occurred was that my friend screeched to a stop, and they got out of the car, and it came running over to me. Now, because of the fact that I had, on occasion, for my own amusement, developed a habit of faking my death,
Oh, God.
they thought that I was totally fine. So they proceeded to kick me in order to get me up. When I didn't move, they were like, he's really committed to the bit. So my buddy Eric hauled off and smacked me in the head as hard as he could. Which is exactly the moment when a grand mal seizure kicked in and I started to flop around on the street like a fish out of water. Whether or not it's his fault that or it's just a coincidence, doesn't matter, because every so often when Eric's around, I just say, it's your turn to buy drinks. He says, why? And I just go, I don't know. So with me splatting on the pavement, pissing my pants, my friends start to panic. And this was the era before cell phones were ubiquitously available and everybody had one. So they had to go pounding on doors to get access to a landline. This was not helpful because we were a pack of heavy metal weirdos in suburbia. When my buddy Joe knocked on a lady's door, she opened it up and slammed it in his face like, not today, Satan. Eventually, they were able to get somebody to generously let them use a landline. They called 911. All the first responders came. And my friends are desperately trying to explain to the police that we do not have drugs or alcohol with us. We're just stupid. Meanwhile, the paramedics are doing their best to stabilize me and make sure my situation doesn't get worse. One of them proceeds to try to attach an IV to me that will facilitate me being stabilized. And I thank them by punching him in the face. And when the other paramedic responded to that, I punched them in the face. Now, I know that I look like a guy who murders teenagers in a cabin in the woods. But I am typically not a violent person. However, I proceed to thrash the hell out of the paramedics, and as the ambulance is rocking back and forth, the police are drawn curiously to what's going on. So when a police officer climbs into the back of the ambulance, I kicked him in the face. He flies out, lands hard on his back, and I dive on top of him like a fat kid on a cheesecake and wail the ever-loving hell out of him. It was my first honest taste of white privilege. Because, let's be honest, in any other situation, I would have been shot right through the face.
Oh my God.
I'm aware of it. Nobody needs to tell me about it later. Well, what it comes down to is the paramedics recover They grab a syringe full of sedative, they tackle me, inject me, I vanish out of existence and then wake up in the hospital later. I'm sitting there telling this story to these two kids, and as I'm recollecting this thing that's been put together, I start to think to myself, oh my God, this thing has sort of mutated over time, and I'm an urban legend in my own high school. Am I currently killing what might be my only decent legacy in life? But sure enough, these kids are so ecstatic about it that when it's over, they're just like, has anything else that's really that cool ever happened to you? Like, oh yeah. But those are stories for another time.